The morning coffee in President William's cup went cold as the massive alien ship cast its shadow across half the Earth. Every television screen on the planet flickered to life with the same message, transmitted in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, and dozens of other languages simultaneously. The voice belonged to something that called itself Ambassador Thren, and its words would echo through history. Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. You have been discovered by the Unified Galactic Council, and your species requires immediate classification and integration into galactic society. Dr. Rebecca Torres rushed through the halls of the Pentagon, her tablet displaying readings that defied every law of physics she knew. The ship above them measured nearly 50 kilometers in length, yet it produced no heat signature, no electromagnetic interference, and somehow maintained perfect position without any visible propulsion system. 3 days ago, humanity had believed they were alone in the universe. Now they faced technology that made their most advanced. Spacecraft looked like paper airplanes. The aliens' message continued with mechanical precision. Based on preliminary scans of your species and technological development, you have been classified as Level C entities. This classification carries specific restrictions and obligations that must be implemented within 30 standard galactic days. General Harris slammed his fist on the conference table as the transmission outlined humanity's new reality. They would surrender all nuclear weapons immediately. Their space program would be dismantled. All research into faster-than-light travel must cease. In exchange, they would receive basic medical technology that could extend human lifespan by perhaps 50 years and agricultural improvements that might feed an additional billion people. This is not a negotiation, Ambassador Thren's voice echoed through every speaker on Earth. These protocols have been successfully implemented across 47,000 inhabited worlds. Compliance ensures peaceful integration into galactic society. Resistance results in corrective measures. The President stared at the holographic display showing the alien vessel. Intelligence reports flooded in from every nation on Earth, all reaching the same conclusion: humanity possessed nothing that could even scratch the surface of that ship. Their most powerful missiles would likely bounce off harmlessly, assuming they could even reach their target through whatever defensive systems protected it. Dr. Torres pulled up the detailed analysis her team had compiled in the past 72 hours. The Council's database, freely transmitted to demonstrate their overwhelming knowledge, contained information on thousands of species across the galaxy. Each one followed the same pattern: discovery, classification, integration, and then centuries of service in predetermined roles based on their species, natural abilities, and technological level. Humans would join the ranks of Class C species, working as miners, laborers, and basic technicians for more advanced civilizations. Their children would be educated according to Council standards, learning enough to perform their assigned functions but never enough to advance beyond their designated role. Earth's resources would be harvested according to galactic efficiency standards, with a small percentage allocated for human survival needs. The President looked around the room at the assembled leaders of the free world. Premier Chun spoke first, his translator working overtime. My scientists estimate that ship could sterilize our entire planet within hours. We have no choice but to comply. Chancellor Mueller nodded grimly. The German analysis confirms this. Their technology is beyond our comprehension. Resistance would be suicide. But Dr. Torres had spent her career studying impossible problems, and something about the Council's approach bothered her. Mr. President, I need to show you something troubling in their data. She activated the holographic display, showing the Council's records of previous integrations. Species after species had faced the same ultimatum, and every single one had eventually submitted. The pattern was identical across thousands of worlds: initial resistance, demonstration of overwhelming force, grudging acceptance, and then gradual absorption into the galactic hierarchy. Notice anything strange about these records? She asked. The assembled leaders. The President studied the data carefully. They're too perfect. Every species follows exactly the same pattern. Exactly. In 47,000 successful integrations, not one species ever found a way to resist effectively. Not one ever developed technology that surprised them. Not one ever escaped their classification system. General Harris leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Doctor? I'm suggesting that the Council has grown complacent. They've been using the same playbook for thousands of years because it's never failed. They expect predictable responses to predictable stimuli. The transmission from Ambassador Thren continued, now detailing the specific timeline for humanity's surrender. All nuclear weapons would be transported to designated collection points within 10 days. All space-based assets would be deorbited within 20 days. The complete technological inventory of human civilization would be submitted for review and approval within 30 days. Dr. Torres pulled up another display showing Earth's unique characteristics compared to other integrated worlds. Look at this data. Every other species the Council encountered was either far less technologically advanced than us, or had developed along predictable lines for centuries before first contact. We're different. How so? The President asked. We developed nuclear weapons and space travel within the same century. We went from horse-drawn carriages to quantum computers in less than 200 years. Our technological advancement curve is steeper than any species in their database. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Ambassador Thren's voice droned on about the benefits of galactic citizenship and the prosperity that awaited humanity once they accepted their proper place in the cosmic order. There's something else, Dr. Torres continued. Their scans show they understand our current technology, but they're basing our classification on what we have now, not what we might develop. General Harris caught on first. You think we can surprise them? I think they've never encountered a species that develops as rapidly as we do. Their classification system assumes technological advancement happens over millennia, not decades. The President stood, his decision crystallizing. Doctor, how long would we need to make a difference? Unknown, sir. But I know that giving up. Guarantees we'll spend the next 1,000 years as galactic servants. Fighting back at least gives us a chance. The alien ship above continued its patient orbit, its occupants confident in the inevitable outcome. Ambassador Thren concluded the transmission with a reminder of the 30-day deadline and coordinates for humanity's surrender, but in that Pentagon conference room, humanity chose a different path. They would not submit to galactic servitude. Nor would they fight a hopeless battle against impossible odds. Instead, they would do what humans had always done when faced with insurmountable challenges. They would find a third option that no one else had considered. The President looked at his advisors with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to disappear. The last radio transmission from Earth ended at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time, cutting off mid-sentence during a routine weather report from London. Every satellite went dark. Every television station fell silent, and every electromagnetic signal that had been pouring from the planet for over a century simply stopped. To anyone watching from space, Earth had died. Dr. Alex Morgan descended into the deepest levels of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, where teams of scientists worked by candlelight and hand-cranked generators. The transition had been brutal but necessary. Within 6 hours of the President's order, every piece of electronic equipment on Earth had been either destroyed or moved to heavily shielded underground facilities. Humanity had voluntarily returned to the pre-electronic age. At least on the surface. Ambassador Thren observed this development with mild interest from the bridge of his vessel. The Kaleri had seen this response before, though rarely so completely executed. Some species chose self-destruction over integration, usually through nuclear warfare or environmental collapse. The sudden silence from Earth suggested the humans had chosen extinction rather than accept their assigned role in galactic society. Shall we investigate, Ambassador? Asked his second-in-command, a younger Kaleri named Vorth. Unnecessary, Thren replied, updating his report to the Council. Primitive species often exhibit this behavior when confronted with superior civilization. Mark the system as quarantined and file the standard extinction report. Will return in 50 years to confirm the planet's sterility. The massive council ship departed Earth system 3 days later, its sensors detecting no signs of organized civilization on the planet below. Ambassador Thren's report reached the Galactic Council within a week, where it joined thousands of similar files documenting species that had chosen destruction over integration. The Council expressed mild disappointment, but no surprise. Such outcomes were regrettable but not uncommon. Meanwhile, Colonel David Reynolds coordinated the greatest migration in human history from a bunker buried 2 kilometers beneath the Nevada desert. Across the planet, 8 billion people were learning to live like their ancestors had before electricity. Families moved into underground shelters, abandoned mine shafts, and deep ocean installations that had been constructed in secret over the past decade under the guise of disaster preparedness programs. The preparation had begun years earlier. Though few had understood its true purpose, Dr. Rebecca Torres had convinced world leaders to invest in what she called civilization insurance, vast underground complexes, capable of sustaining millions of people indefinitely. The official story involved asteroid impacts and supervolcanic eruptions, but the real purpose had been to hide humanity from galactic detection. Captain Lisa Chung emerged from the submersible that had carried her team to the wreckage of a council probe, recovered from the Pacific Ocean floor where it had crashed during the initial survey of Earth. The alien technology was beautiful in its complexity, but also vulnerable in ways its creators had never considered. Council systems were designed to be tamper-proof through bureaucratic protocols rather than physical security. Assuming that no unauthorized species would ever gain access to their equipment, human engineers worked around the clock to understand the recovered technology. What they discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. The Council's faster-than-light drive didn't actually exceed the speed of light. It folded space-time through dimensional manipulation. Their sensors detected electromagnetic signatures and quantum fluctuations that were byproducts of advanced technology. Most importantly, their targeting systems relied on identifying specific technological markers that every known civilization produced. Dr. Morgan's breakthrough came during his 3rd week of studying Council computer systems. The aliens had never encountered a species that deliberately rejected advanced technology, so they had no protocols for detecting civilizations that had voluntarily gone dark. Their sensors were calibrated to find the electromagnetic signatures of spacefaring societies, not the heat signatures of underground installations shielded by kilometers of rock. Engineer Tom Williams led the team developing Earth's new communication network. Traditional radio and satellite communications were impossible, but quantum entanglement offered possibilities the Council had never considered. Using principles derived from their own technology, human scientists created instantaneous communication. Links that existed outside normal spacetime, completely invisible to conventional sensors. The network grew day by day, connecting underground facilities across the globe through quantum tunnels that defied detection. Families separated by continents could communicate instantly. Scientific data flowed freely between research stations, and military coordination proceeded without any electromagnetic signature that could be detected from space. Dr. Emily Foster worked with psychologists and anthropologists to analyze captured Council communications. The galactic civilization operated on principles of rigid hierarchy and absolute predictability. Every species had its assigned role, every individual had their predetermined function, and deviation from established patterns was considered impossible rather than merely forbiddance. "They're not evil," she explained to President Williams during one of their regular briefings. "They genuinely believe they're helping us by assigning us a place in their system. The concept that we might want something different or that we might be capable of achieving it simply doesn't exist in their worldview." The president nodded grimly. Life underground was hard, but reports from around the globe showed remarkable adaptation. Children attended schools and converted subway tunnels. Farmers grew crops in hydroponic facilities powered by geothermal energy. And scientists made breakthrough discoveries using equipment that produced no detectable emissions. "Commander," Rachel Brooks tested the first prototype stealth vehicle in an abandoned mine shaft converted into a testing facility. The craft was tiny compared to Council ships, barely large enough for a crew of 3, but it incorporated principles of dimensional manipulation that made it effectively invisible to their sensors. Unlike Council vessels, which announced their presence across multiple dimensions, human ships existed in carefully controlled quantum states that left no detectable signature. The most remarkable discovery came from studying Council psychology. Through their own communications, the aliens had been so successful for so long that they had become incapable of imagining failure. Their protocols assumed that any species advanced enough to threaten them would announce itself through the same technological signatures they had always used to detect emerging civilizations. Humanity had chosen a different path. Rather than trying to match Council technology through conventional development, they had learned to exceed it through unconventional thinking. Human ships didn't try to be faster or more powerful than Council vessels. They simply existed in ways that Council sensors couldn't detect. After 6 months of silence, Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history. An advanced technological civilization that was completely invisible to established detection methods. The planet appeared dead to Council sensors, but beneath its surface, humanity was developing capabilities that would have terrified Ambassador Thren. If he had possessed any way of detecting them, the silence protocol had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Humanity had not merely hidden from the galaxy. They had found a way to develop and advance while remaining completely outside the Council's sphere of awareness. Soon, they would be ready to return to the stars, not as conquered servants, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, a civilization that existed beyond the boundaries of galactic law. 5 years after Earth went silent, Dr. Alex Morgan stood in what had once been an abandoned copper mine in Chile, now transformed into humanity's most advanced research facility. The cavern stretched for kilometers underground, filled with technology that would have seemed impossible to the species that had first faced the Council's ultimatum. Humans had not merely survived their self-imposed exile from galactic civilization. They had evolved beyond recognition. The breakthrough had come from understanding what the Council could not. That technological advancement didn't require following predetermined paths. Every species in the galactic database had developed along similar lines because the Council's integration process forced them into rigid patterns of acceptable growth. Humanity had chosen a different route entirely, developing technology that existed outside the Council's comprehension. Commander Rachel Brooks piloted the Shadow Walker, humanity's first fully operational stealth vessel. Through the asteroid belt beyond Mars, the ship bore no resemblance to Council designs or even Earth's primitive spacecraft from before the silence. It existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions, allowing it to phase through solid matter when necessary while remaining completely invisible to any known detection system. "Navigation confirms we're approaching the target," reported Lieutenant Foster from the ship's quantum communication array. The target was a Council automated monitoring station, one of thousands scattered throughout the galaxy to watch for emerging civilizations. These stations had remained undetected by human astronomers before the silence, but 5 years of studying captured Council technology had revealed their locations and purposes. The monitoring station drifted in the void between star systems, a crystalline structure the size of a small building that processed sensor data from nearby worlds and transmitted reports to Council headquarters. It had been operating for 3 centuries without maintenance, following programming so rigid that it had never been updated since installation. Brooks guided her ship directly through the station's hull, the quantum phase technology allowing them to occupy the same space without physical contact. Inside, the alien technology hummed with ancient power, processing data according to algorithms older than human civilization. But the station's sensors were calibrated to detect the electromagnetic signatures of conventional technology, not the quantum fluctuations of human innovation. Engineer Tom Williams worked with his team to install monitoring devices inside the station's core systems. These devices were smaller than coins and completely undetectable. designed to intercept Council communications and relay them back to Earth through quantum tunnels that existed outside normal spacetime. Within hours, humanity would have access to real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. The information they gathered revealed a picture of galactic civilization that both amazed and horrified human analysts. The Council ruled over millions of worlds through a system of absolute control that had remained unchanged for millennia. Species were classified not just by their technological level but by their psychological profiles, with entire civilizations assigned roles based on assumptions about their nature and capabilities. Dr. Rebecca Torres reviewed the intelligence reports from her underground office beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The Council's records showed no awareness that Earth's silence had been deliberate. Their databases still classified humanity as an extinct species, another civilization that had chosen self-destruction over integration. This misconception had become humanity's greatest advantage. "They're not looking for us because they believe we're dead," she explained to President Williams during their weekly briefing. "But more importantly, they wouldn't recognize us even if they found us because we've developed beyond their classification system." The president studied reports from research facilities around the globe. Human technology had advanced more in 5 years of underground development than in the previous 50 years of conventional progress. The pressure of extinction had focused human creativity like never before, while the absence of electromagnetic signatures had forced innovations that Council science considered impossible. Captain Lisa Shang led exploration missions beyond the solar system, using ships that could travel faster than light without producing the dimensional distortions that Council sensors monitored. Human vessels moved through space like ghosts, visiting worlds and gathering intelligence while leaving no trace of their passage. They discovered civilizations living under Council rule, some thriving in their assigned roles, but others clearly chafing under restrictions they dared not question. The most shocking discovery came from observing Council military forces during routine patrols. Their technology was certainly advanced, but it had remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Innovation was discouraged in favor of proven methods, and their tactical doctrine assumed that any opponent would fight according to established galactic conventions. Dr. Morgan's analysis of captured Council weapons revealed fundamental weaknesses that their creators had never considered. The energy shields that protected their ships were calibrated to deflect known energy types, but they had never encountered the quantum disruption fields that human scientists had developed. Their targeting systems relied on sensors that could be confused by dimensional phase shifting, and their communication networks used encryption methods that human quantum computers could break in seconds. Lieutenant Commander Brooks returned from another reconnaissance mission with intelligence that changed humanity's entire perspective on galactic politics. The Council was not the unified force it appeared to be, but rather a collection of species held together by mutual fear and ancient agreements. Many member civilizations possessed technology that could challenge Council supremacy, but they had been psychologically conditioned to believe that resistance was impossible. "They're not invincible," she reported to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in their underground command center. "They're bureaucrats with advanced weapons, and they've been in power so long that they've forgotten how to deal with unexpected situations." The psychological profiles that Dr. Emily Foster developed from intercepted Council communications revealed a civilization paralyzed by its own success. Individual Council members had never experienced defeat, never faced an enemy that didn't follow predictable patterns, and never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved through standard protocols. Engineer Williams completed work on humanity's most ambitious project, a self-replicating manufacturing system that could construct advanced technology using only common elements found in asteroids and comets. These factories could remain hidden indefinitely while producing everything from quantum computers to faster-than-light engines, allowing human civilization to expand throughout the galaxy without establishing any permanent bases that Council sensors might detect. The manufacturing systems represented a fundamental shift in human strategy. Rather than building a few large installations that could be discovered and destroyed, humanity would scatter millions of tiny facilities throughout space, each one capable of producing the technology needed for continued expansion. The galaxy itself would become humanity's factory, hidden in plain sight among the countless rocks and ice balls that drifted between the stars. As the 5th anniversary of Earth's silence approached, humanity had transformed from a single-planet species, facing extinction, into something unprecedented in galactic history. They possessed technology that exceeded Council capabilities in key areas, intelligence networks that penetrated to the highest levels of galactic government, and manufacturing capacity that could be scaled up indefinitely without detection. But, perhaps most importantly, they had maintained something that every other species in the galaxy had lost during their integration into Council society: the ability to think beyond the boundaries of established systems. While the Council continued to operate according to patterns unchanged for millennia, humanity prepared to introduce variables that would fundamentally alter the equation of galactic power. The revolution was ready to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first impossible thing happened on a Tuesday in the Kepler sector, where a Council supply convoy discovered their cargo holds completely empty despite having been sealed with quantum locks that had never been breached in 4,000 years of service. Fleet Commander Zenth studied the security recordings with growing confusion. Every monitoring device showed the holds remaining sealed throughout the journey, yet 50,000 tons of processed metals had simply vanished. Admiral Susan Carter watched the chaos unfold from her command center aboard the Quantum Shadow, a vessel that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously while remaining invisible in all of them. Her ship drifted through the space between galaxies, far from any Council sensor network, coordinating operations that spanned hundreds of star systems. The missing cargo was just the beginning of humanity's shadow war against galactic tyranny. Phase 2 targets are confirmed, reported Colonel Martinez from the tactical station. Across the galaxy, human infiltration teams were moving into position around critical Council installations. These weren't traditional military targets, but rather the bureaucratic nerve centers that kept galactic civilization functioning according to its rigid patterns. The second impossible thing occurred 3 days later when the central data processing facility on Rigel 7 experienced a complete system failure that diagnostics claimed was impossible. Every computer in the facility continued operating normally according to their internal sensors, but the data they processed became increasingly corrupted in ways that followed no logical pattern. Within a week, the facility's output had become so unreliable that 3 star systems lost their resource allocation schedules. Captain Mike Roberts led his infiltration team through the quantum tunnels they had carved through the facility's databases. The humans moved like digital ghosts through systems that had been designed to be impenetrable, leaving behind subtle changes that would cascade into major disruptions over time. They weren't destroying the Council's infrastructure, they were teaching it to destroy itself. Dr. Rebecca Torres analyzed the psychological impact reports flowing in from human observation posts throughout the galaxy. Council forces were experiencing something they had never encountered in their 1,000-year dominance: uncertainty. Equipment failed in impossible ways, communications arrived corrupted, and supply chains broke down for reasons that made no sense according to established physics. "They're not just confused," she explained to President Williams during their secure briefing. "They're terrified. For the first time in millennia, the Council is facing problems they can't solve by following their standard procedures." The third impossible thing happened simultaneously across 50 different worlds when Council military bases discovered that their weapons had been mysteriously recalibrated overnight. Every energy cannon now fired at half power, every shield generator produced barriers with specific frequency gaps, and every targeting computer had developed a peculiar blind spot exactly 47 degrees off-center. Security reviews found no evidence that the systems had been accessed. Yet the modifications were undeniably present. Lieutenant Commander Brooks led the technical team responsible for the weapons modifications, working from a mobile base that phased in and out of normal space to avoid detection. The changes they made weren't random sabotage, but carefully calculated adjustments designed to create specific vulnerabilities that only human forces knew how to exploit. The Council's response followed predictable patterns that human analysts had mapped from years of studying their communications. First came increased security measures, then demands for detailed reports from local commanders, followed by committees formed to investigate the anomalies. Every step of their reaction had been anticipated and countered in advance by human planning teams who understood Council psychology better than the Council understood itself. Engineer Tom Williams coordinated the most ambitious phase of the Shadow campaign from a manufacturing facility hidden inside a comet in the Vega system. His teams had spent months placing quantum resonance devices throughout Council space, tiny mechanisms that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions and could influence physical systems without any detectable interaction. The beauty of quantum mechanics, he explained to his engineering staff, is that the Council's sensors can only detect effects in normal spacetime. We're operating from dimensions they don't even know exist. The fourth impossible thing manifested as a wave of spontaneous malfunctions that swept across Council space like a plague. Faster-than-light drives began suffering random shutdowns. Communication arrays started broadcasting on wrong frequencies, and artificial intelligence systems developed peculiar behavioral quirks that made them unreliable but never quite dysfunctional. Enough to justify replacement. Dr. Morgan's research teams had spent years studying the quantum signatures of Council technology, identifying the precise frequencies and dimensional coordinates where their systems were most vulnerable. The resonance devices that Williams' engineers had distributed throughout the galaxy were now singing in harmony, creating interference patterns that gradually destabilized every major technological system the Council relied upon. The psychological impact was devastating. Species that had lived under Council rule for centuries began questioning whether their overlords were truly infallible. Reports filtered back to Earth describing widespread panic among Council officials who found themselves dealing with problems that their training had never prepared them to handle. Commander Lopez led strike teams that established permanent bases in the spaces between star systems, regions that Council sensors ignored because they contained nothing of apparent value. These installations could manufacture everything from quantum computers to faster-than-light engines using only the sparse matter found in interstellar space, creating an invisible infrastructure that spanned the galaxy. The fifth impossible thing occurred when Council intelligence services discovered that their most secure communications had been compromised for years, yet their encryption systems showed no signs of being broken. Human quantum computers had been reading their messages in real time, while leaving the original transmissions completely intact, creating the illusion of perfect security while providing humanity with complete intelligence on Council operations. Admiral Carter reviewed the strategic situation from her mobile command post as it drifted through the cosmic void between galaxies. Human forces now controlled vast regions of space without the Council even knowing they existed there. Invisible manufacturing facilities produced advanced technology. Stealth vessels moved freely throughout galactic civilization and quantum networks provided instantaneous communication across impossible distances. "We've reached the tipping point," she reported to Earth's leadership. "The Council's control is breaking down faster than they can repair it." Their response to each crisis creates new vulnerabilities that we're already prepared to exploit. The sixth impossible thing was the complete disappearance of Ambassador Thren's flagship during a routine patrol mission. The massive vessel simply vanished from all sensors while transmitting normal status reports, creating the disturbing impression that it continued to exist somewhere while being completely unreachable. Search efforts found no debris, no distress signals, and no explanation for how a ship that size could disappear so completely. In reality, human quantum phase technology had shifted the entire vessel into a dimensional pocket, where it remained perfectly preserved but completely inaccessible to Council rescue efforts. The ship's crew continued their daily routines, unaware that they were now prisoners in a quantum bottle that existed outside normal space-time. Dr. Foster's psychological analysis teams reported that Council morale had reached critical levels. Military commanders requested transfers to avoid the inexplicable equipment failures. Civilian administrators struggled with supply chains that made no logical sense. And even high-ranking officials began questioning whether the Council's technological supremacy was as absolute as they had always believed. The revolution had succeeded beyond humanity's wildest expectations. Without firing a single shot or making any open declarations of war, they had systematically undermined every foundation of Council power. The galaxy's rulers found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, using weapons that wouldn't work properly, and coordinating through communications that might be compromised in ways they couldn't detect. As impossible things continued to multiply across Council space. One fact became increasingly clear to anyone paying attention. Something had fundamentally changed in the balance of galactic power, and the old order that had ruled for millennia was crumbling before forces it couldn't understand or counter. The Shadow War was nearly won, and soon humanity would be ready to step out of the darkness and offer the galaxy something it had forgotten was possible: a choice. The message that broke 7 years of silence arrived simultaneously at every inhabited world in the galaxy, bypassing all Council communication networks and appearing directly on every screen, in every language spoken by voices that somehow sounded familiar to each listener despite being completely unknown. President Williams looked older than his years as he faced the cameras hidden deep beneath Earth's surface, but his voice carried the weight of a species that had refused to surrender. Citizens of the galaxy, we are humanity. 7 years ago, we were ordered to accept our place as servants in a system we never chose. Today, we return to offer you something your rulers never could: the chance to decide your own destiny. Ambassador Thren watched the transmission from his dimensional prison, still unaware that his ship existed outside normal space-time. Around him, his crew continued their routines while the galaxy their civilization had ruled for millennia began to crumble. The impossible things that had plagued Council space for months suddenly made sense as the humans revealed their hidden war against galactic tyranny. Admiral Carter materialized her command fleet in the heart of Council space, hundreds of ships appearing simultaneously around the capital world of Nexus Prime. The vessels looked nothing like traditional spacecraft, their forms shifting through multiple dimensions as they maintained perfect formation while remaining completely immune to Council defensive systems. Every weapon fired at them passed harmlessly through quantum-phased hulls, while their presence alone demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded anything in the Council's arsenal. "This is not an invasion," Williams continued his broadcast. "We have not come to conquer or destroy. We have come to offer freedom to every species that wants it, and partnership to those ready to embrace change." The response was immediate and chaotic. On worlds throughout the galaxy, populations that had lived under Council rule for centuries suddenly realized that the impossible malfunctions and mysterious failures plaguing their systems had been acts of liberation rather than random catastrophes. The rigid hierarchy that had seemed eternal and unchangeable was revealed to be vulnerable to forces that operated outside its comprehension. Dr. Rebecca Torres coordinated the diplomatic missions that followed the revelation, working with species that had spent millennia believing they were incapable of technological advancement beyond their assigned roles. Human scientists shared the quantum principles that had made their revolution possible, demonstrating that the limitations imposed by Council classification systems had been artificial barriers rather than natural law. The Altarian Mining Collective was among the first to embrace the change, their workers discovering that they possessed intellectual capabilities their Council overseers had systematically ignored for 1,000 years. Within weeks of receiving human educational technology, Altarian engineers were developing innovations that exceeded their former masters. Understanding, Commander Brooks led the liberation of species that had been classified as purely manual laborers, revealing scientific and artistic potential that had been suppressed for generations. The vegan agricultural caste proved capable of advanced biotechnology once freed from restrictions that had limited them to basic farming techniques. The Centauri Transport Guild developed faster-than-light navigation methods that surpassed Council systems within months of gaining access to quantum computing principles. The galaxy never needed rulers, Williams explained to the growing alliance of liberated worlds. It needed cooperation, innovation, and the freedom to grow beyond artificial limitations. Engineer Tom Williams established the first galactic innovation centers, facilities where species could collaborate without the Council's restrictive classification system. Former enemies worked together to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable under the old order, their combined knowledge creating breakthrough discoveries that no single species could have achieved alone. The Council's response was swift but ineffective. Fleet Admiral Corfax led the largest military force in galactic history toward the liberated sectors, confident that superior firepower would restore order to their domain. His ships arrived to find empty space where human vessels had been detected, only to discover too late that they were surrounded by enemies operating from dimensions their sensors couldn't detect. The battle that followed lasted less than an hour. Council weapons passed harmlessly through quantum-phased human ships while return fire struck with surgical precision, disabling engines and weapons without causing casualties. Within minutes, the galaxy's most powerful military force found itself completely helpless, their vessels drifting powerless while human boarding parties offered their crews a choice: continued service to a failing system or partnership in building something better. Dr. Morgan's research teams worked with former Council scientists, who chose to embrace the new reality rather than cling to obsolete hierarchies. Many of the galaxy's most brilliant minds had spent centuries developing technology within narrow parameters defined by bureaucratic limitations. Once freed from those constraints, their innovations accelerated at rates that astounded even human observers. The transformation spread faster than anyone had anticipated. Species that had been enemies for millennia discovered common ground when freed from artificial competition for Council approval. Trade networks established themselves along principles of mutual benefit rather than hierarchical exploitation. Scientific discoveries flowed freely between worlds that had previously been forbidden to share knowledge. Captain Lisa Chang led exploration missions to regions of space that the Council had declared off-limits, discovering civilizations that had been hiding from galactic authority for thousands of years. These refugee species brought knowledge and perspectives that enriched the growing alliance, their survival techniques and alternative technologies adding new dimensions to collaborative research efforts. The old Council structure didn't simply collapse, it became irrelevant. Former member species found themselves achieving more through voluntary cooperation in months than they had accomplished under mandatory service for centuries. The rigid caste system that had defined galactic civilization for millennia was replaced by fluid networks of collaboration, based on interest and capability rather than arbitrary classification. Dr. Foster's analysis of the transition revealed patterns that surprised even human observers. Species weren't abandoning their traditional strengths, but rather expanding beyond the limitations that had been imposed upon them. The Altarian miners became renowned for their engineering innovations, but they never stopped mining. They simply began extracting resources with efficiency and creativity that their former overseers had never imagined possible. President Williams addressed the growing galactic alliance from the first surface facility Earth had operated in 7 years. Research center built on the exact spot where the Council's ultimatum had been delivered. We have proven that growth, adaptation, and the refusal to accept artificial limitations are forces more powerful than any military technology. The final irony was revealed when Ambassador Thren was released from his dimensional prison to find a galaxy transformed beyond recognition. His ship's crew was offered the same choice as every other Council citizen: embrace change and contribute to the new order, or remain trapped in the obsolete thinking that had once ruled the stars. Most chose change. The few who clung to the old ways found themselves increasingly isolated as the galaxy moved beyond their comprehension. The Council's greatest failure had been their inability to imagine that their perfect system could be improved upon. Humanity had proven them wrong by refusing to accept that perfection was possible within a generation. Children grew up in a galaxy where species classification was a historical curiosity rather than a binding law. They learned that technological advancement came through innovation and cooperation rather than bureaucratic approval. Most importantly, they understood that any system that claimed to be unchangeable was really just waiting for someone brave enough to prove it wrong.